Today we are going to review organelles of the cell. If you remember, organelles are basically the organs of a cell. They help the cell function and work. Let's begin with the cellular membrane. The cellular membrane forms the outer boundary of the cell and allows only certain materials to move into or out of the cell. Basically, it is selectively permeable. All cells have a cell membrane. Their function is to protect the cell and to hold it all together. They also control the movement of materials into and out of the cell. We can nickname this the gatekeeper. Some things can enter and other things can exit, but not everything can. The cell membrane contains proteins, lipids, and phospholipids. The cell membrane has two layers of phospholipids. Lipid ends of phospholipids form the inner part of the membrane. Phosphorus-containing ends of the phospholipids are water-loving or hydrophilic. These ends form the outer part of the membrane. You can see these in the picture to the right of your screen. Some of the proteins and lipids control the movement of materials into and out of the cell. Some of the proteins form passageways. Nutrients and water move into the cell, and waste move out of the cell through these protein passageways. The cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton is a web of proteins in the cytoplasm. It acts both as a muscle and a skeleton for the cell. It keeps the cell's membranes from collapsing on each other. It also helps some cells move. It gives the cells shape and structure. The nucleus. The nucleus directs the activity of a cell. It contains chromosomes with the DNA in it. DNA contains the information on how to make a cell's proteins. These proteins control the chemical reactions in a cell. But proteins are not made in the nucleus. They're made by ribosomes. Messages for how to make proteins are copied from the DNA. These messages are then sent out of the nucleus through the membranes. So the nucleus's function is basically the brain of the cell. It controls all cell activities, including how the cell grows, develops, and divides. We can call it the control center. The nucleus membrane. The nucleus is covered by two membranes. Materials cross this double membrane by passing through little pores. The function of this nucleus membrane is to protect the nucleus. It controls movement of materials into and out of the nucleus, including the movement of proteins. We give it the nickname the nucleus gatekeeper. The nucleolus. The nucleus of many cells has a dark area called the nucleolus. The nucleolus is where a cell begins to make its ribosomes. Now, the function of these ribosomes is to make proteins. So this is very important. So the function of the nucleolus is to make ribosomes. So we sometimes call it the mini control center. While the nucleus is the main control center, the nucleolus is the mini control center. So what are ribosomes? They make proteins. What are these proteins? They're basically the building blocks for everything the cell needs to function. And they also contain RNA. If you remember from our previous lessons, RNA, or ribonucleic acid, is basically part of this building block. Ribosomes are the smallest of all of the organelles. They use amino acids to make these proteins that are needed to run the cell. Because they build things, such as proteins, we call them the builder. Endoplasmic reticulum. We can abbreviate endoplasmic reticulum by calling it the ER. The ER is the system of folded membranes which proteins, lipids, and other materials are made. The ER is part of the initial delivery system of the cell. Its folded membrane contains many tubes and passageways. Substances move through the ER to different places in the cell. Endoplasmic reticulum is either rough ER or smooth ER. The part of the ER covered in ribosomes is rough ER. Ribosomes on rough ER make many of the cell's proteins. The ER delivers these proteins throughout the cell. The ER that lacks ribosomes is smooth ER. The functions of smooth ER include making lipids and breaking down toxic materials that could damage the cell. So its function is to transport materials within the cell. And because its function is to transport, we give it the nickname of roadways. The mitochondria. The function of the mitochondria is to break down food and to release energy into the cell. Because of this, it's known as the powerhouse of the cell. The organelle in which sugar is broken down to produce energy is called the mitochondria. Energy released by the mitochondria is stored in a substance called ATP. Okay, adenosine triphosphate. Oh goodness, try saying that 5 times fast. The cell then uses ATP to do work. Most of the cell's ATP is made in the inner membrane of the cell's mitochondria. Most eukaryotic cells have mitochondria. Mitochondria have their own DNA, and mitochondria can divide within a cell. This is what the inside of a mitochondria will look like. Feel free to pause the video if you would like to study this picture more. Now, this picture also shows the position of mitochondria and mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial DNA is not passed down from father to child, but rather from mother to child. So your mitochondrial DNA can be traced to your mother, not your father. Cytoplasm, the fluid inside of a cell and almost all of its contents. Its function, well, it's a watery gel-like substance that cushions and protects organelles. Because it's gel-like, we call it the jelly. Golgi complex, or the Golgi apparatus. This organelle packages and distributes proteins. It looks like smooth ER. Lipids and proteins from the ER are delivered to the Golgi complex. There, the lipids and proteins may be modified to do different jobs. The final products are enclosed in a piece of the Golgi complex's membrane. This membrane pinches off to form a small bubble. The bubble transports its contents to other parts of the cell or out of the cell. So its function is to ship things created by the ER and ribosomes to the rest of the cell. Because its function is to ship things, we call it the post office. The bubble that forms from the Golgi complex's membrane is something that we call a vesicle. It's a small sac that surrounds material that is ready to be moved into or out of the cell. All eukaryotic cells have vesicles. Vesicles also move material within the cell. Lysosomes. Lysosomes are vesicles that are responsible for digestion inside of the cell. Think of lysosomes as Lysol. They're there to clean things up. They contain digestive enzymes that destroy worn out or damaged organelles and get rid of waste materials and protect the cell from foreign invaders. Because its function is to ship things created by the ER and ribosomes to the rest of the cell, we call this the cleanup crew. Vacuoles. Vacuoles are large storage areas for the cell, or at least they are in plant cells. In animal cells, if they're there, they tend to be quite small. A large vesicle in a plant and fungal cells. Some vacuoles act like large lysosomes. They store digestive enzymes and aid in digestion within the cell. Other vacuoles in plant cells store water and other liquids. Vacuoles that are full of water help support the cell. Some plants wilt when their vacuoles lose water. Because of this, we call it the storage tank. Take some time to review your organelles and their functions. What organelle contains the cell's DNA and is the control center of the cell? What organelle has amino acids hooked together to make proteins? What is the organelle that makes lipids, breaks down drugs and other substances, and packages proteins for the Golgi complex? What is the organelle that breaks down food molecules to make ATP? The organelle that uses energy from sunlight to make food is called? The organelle that processes and transports proteins and other materials out of the cell. The organelle that stores water and other materials is called? The organelle that digests food particles, wastes, cell parts, and foreign invaders. If these are the answers that you provided, then you are correct. If not, take some time to go back and review each of these organelles. It will be very important for you to remember them later.